Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. Glad you could be here. Yes, Dana, I know. God, it's like I try so hard. I try so hard, and it's just not good enough. For some people, it's just never going to be good enough. And I have to accept that. I have to be at peace with that. Anyway, thank you all for joining me. As always, a quick reminder, and thanks to Some Random Geek, my unofficial producer, for reminding me to also put a pinned chat message about this in the live chat. I, as always, will be answering questions from patrons and channel members that were pre-submitted over the past week in the first part of the show. So if you're watching live and you have a question that you want to put in the live chat, or you want it to be generous and share a super chat, which are always encouraged and very much appreciated. If possible, please hold off until I get through the patron and member questions, and then I will turn my full attention to the live chat and I will talk about whatever everybody wants to talk about. And if you do share a super chat, I'll be able to acknowledge you and thank you and talk and ask your or answer your question if there's a question attached to it. Whatever you want to do, but just if possible, wait until I get through the patron and member questions, because when I'm doing that, I'm paying attention to that and answering those questions, and I'm not always looking at the live chat. So I'll probably will actually miss you if you have something that you want to get my attention with in the live chat during that. So, having said all that, let us now turn to the pre-submitted questions from my wonderful patrons and channel members. And the first one of those comes from Paul Adler, who joined us during the patron and member hangout this past weekend for the first time. It was good to have you there for the first time, Paul. And Paul says, during the last meetup, you commented that the reason the new Star Trek is often derided as more woke than the old Star Trek arises from the new show's casting decisions rather than their plots. Would be great to hear more thoughts on that. Um, well, I mean, it's not that the new Star Trek shows, like the current generation of Star Trek shows, the Kurtzman shows, I guess you could say, if you want to give it a shorthand, or the Paramount Plus shows. It's not that they're apolitical, and it's certainly not that they aren't, you know, progressive and forward looking and left leaning in terms of their politics. I think all of those things are true, but they haven't been nearly as didactic as classic Star, especially original series and Next Generation. There hasn't been an episode of Star Trek Discovery or Star Trek Picard or Star Trek Lower Decks yet that has been as overtly political as, many episodes of classic Trek, like Let That Be Your Last Battlefield or A Private Little War or what's another like really super political uh you know classic Star Trek episode. But there are lots of classic Star Trek episodes and TNG episodes where the political message is right out front. It's unmistakable. And not just that there's some political stuff being dealt with, but the episode has a message, it has a point of view, it has an argument that it is making to the viewer, and it's really, really difficult to miss. And I don't, and by the way, I don't have a problem with that. I kind of like when Star Trek gets preachy, because it's usually preaching for good things that we need as a society and that people need to be sort of woken up to and made to think about. So I don't have a problem with that. But the new shows are not nearly that preachy. They still have political themes and there are still, political messages in them, but for the most part, they're not nearly as out front about it. So yeah, the quote unquote wokeness comes from the casting. And I think that's what people are complaining about. When people whine and piss and moan about how the newer Star Trek shows are, oh, it's too woke. I like Star Trek before it went woke, right? They can't possibly be talking about the shows being more preachy, because they're not. They can only be talking about the fact that Discovery's lead character is a black woman, and Lower Decks' lead character is a black woman too, and that Picard. Well, they treat Picard like an old man. Like, well, no shit. The guy who plays him is like in his 80s now, so he is an old man, and the character is much older than he was the last time we saw him in the movies, and he's surrounded by a younger cast that is predominantly female, and also has people of color in it, and that's what they're complaining about. That's what they're complaining about not the stories, not the storytelling, because the storytelling is not nearly as politically correct and as overtly political as it used to be. So that's the kind of thing that and whether they say that or not, a lot of them are smart enough that they don't come out and say, I don't like it because there's a black woman in it. I mean, some of them do, but most of them are smart enough to not, either smart enough or just self-deluded enough. They don't even think that, but that's what's going on. Come on. But that to me is a huge part of the beef with those kinds of Star Trek fans who are complaining about the shows for being too woke. Next question is from David Colby, who says, okay, I have a pitch. Star Trek Marines. The show will be marketed on it being about Federation Marine Corps with lots of right-wing signifiers and hints like noble warriors battling to protect civilization, dog whistle, dog whistle. And then once all the right-wing fans are good and excited, boom, every character is queer, trans, or a person of color, and the show is a total leftist polemic. See, unlike most pitches to you, this is more than just a premise. This has an emotional hook, right-wing tears. Do you agree that this would be the funniest thing in the universe? Absolutely, I would love to see this show. I would love to see like a hyper-military Star Trek show that is exactly the kind of show that all these, however they got to be Star Trek fans, all these right-wing Star Trek fans would love. They'd be like, oh yeah, here we go. It's going to be another show about war, and then it's all people of color and queer characters. That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic. That's the kind, see, that's it, make it a good show. Like, obviously, don't just do that to troll the shittiest fans. I mean, make it a good show. But the fact that you would also be pissing off the shittiest fans in the fan base, oh, that's a bonus. That's the icing on the cake. I love that idea. Steven Sutton, again, hello here. What with word count 996 this time with spaces? Well, look at you. Look at you. I think I get why fictional swears don't work, even in fiction. In fiction, you can use made-up places or alien species because they stand in for real things. Klingons are fictional, but honor isn't. Romeo and Juliet aren't real, but love is. They aren't talking about a fictional emotion that's analogous to love. They're talking about love. Say fuck, and you get an emotional response that you don't get when you say table. Graham, Smeg, etc. are in the latter category because we've not had lifetimes of social conditioning telling us that they are taboo words. That said, there is one fictional swear I like. I think I've invented it. It's a gesture. Aggressively raise a backhand as if you're raising a middle finger, but instead of the middle finger, use all four fingers and space them like a Vulcan salute. I call it the live short and go fuck yourself. And the more oomph, the better. Also, if you could put it about a bit, I'm hoping it gets enough traction for Kurtzman to make a canon. So it's kind of like this, like, there you go, buddy. Let me go to, so it's on camera like this, like, what do you think of that, huh? It's kind of like that. I can dig that. It's kind of like, what's her name? Mariner did that a little bit with the Vulcan salute in Lower Decks, where she used it in a very sassy way. And then, they're one of my favorite Star Trek themed robot chicken sketches. It's the one where they all have to beam down. The ship's going to explode and they all have to beam down to the planet one by one. And there's only enough energy. It comes down to Scotty and Spock are the last two on the ship. And there's only enough energy for one of them to make it down. And Spock like double crosses Scotty and gets on the transporter. And as he's beaming down, he gives him the live long and prosper. And then he inverts it. He goes like that and he grabs his crotch as he beams away. So yeah, that could work too. Like you go like this and then you kind of you dip it, so, but yes, I like that. Stephen G. Clenard says, Steve, you're a DC Comics guy. Maybe you can help me with some questions that have been vexing me for some time. Should supervillain henchmen, minions, and lackeys form their own union? What are some demands they could collectively bargain for? I think they should be provided top tier health and dental insurance and on the job training. I also think that supervillains should be required to provide notices of which superheroes are known to be bulletproof, posted prominently in the public area of the lair, such as the Minion Break Room. Speaking of which, do you think this would make a good premise for a minor villain? Mook. Functioning primarily as an illustrator in joke and Easter egg for eagle eyed readers, he has no powers other than an unfortunate propensity to sign up with supervillain gangs just before the proverbial jig was up. He could also have a signature catchphrase for when he is clobbered by a hero, such as oof, ouch, or oh my rotten luck. Thoughts? I love the idea of Mook, or Mook as Dana would pronounce it. I think that's a great idea for a character. I think that's a hilarious joke. And as for the henchman union, yeah, I think your idea, other of course, healthcare is a must, especially in that line of work. I think healthcare should be a sort of blanket demand for all workers who unionize, but especially for the henchmen because they are in a very dangerous line of work and they're always getting the shit kicked out of them. They're basically cannon fodder. So top tier healthcare and dental is very important. I would say, yeah, and notices of which heroes are bulletproof and etc. Like that's all good. All necessary equipment provided and paid for by the supervillain. I think if you expect me to go out as one of your henchmen and you need me carrying a gun, then you better buy me the gun and you better buy me the bullets. And I don't want to be I don't want to have to fill out paperwork every time I pull the trigger. You know what I mean? Like I need to be able to do what I need to do for you. So you need to take care of all that. If there's some kind of an outfit, if there's some kind of a theme to the gang where we all have to dress, like in the old Batman TV show where everybody wore like black turtlenecks with their names on it and stuff. Like I want that all has to be provided. We shouldn't be, we as the hench people shouldn't be paying for any of that. That all has to be provided. And I think that needs to be spelled out in the contract because we are talking about supervillains. These are not the most trustworthy people, so yeah, that would be my contribution to the whole what should the supervillains be collectively bargaining for. But yeah, I like Mook/Mook as a character too. John Burns. So this whole utopian existence from Star Trek will arrive once replication technology. So how much energy is needed to power one of these things? Don't get me wrong, I love the idea of this, but I'm thinking the energy demands are easy on a warp-capable domicile or mode of transportation, but is warp technology feasible today in a home? I know microwaves work without killing us, as far as we know, but landing on a planet and hunting it in a cave doesn't seem the way to go. After that, you can print up all the local currency you might need, but until you've tapped into the energy source, no local funds. Yeah, in one of the books I read for my economics of Star Trek video, they talk about how it's not clear from the show exactly when replicator technology, that like the kind that we see in Next Generation, where they have the magic food hole. There's the magic hole in the wall that makes anything you want in like every room. Like that wasn't really there in Kirk's Enterprise. There were what appeared to be food dispensers, but it wasn't exactly clear how they worked. But the idea of just being able to walk up to a computer terminal and say, give me a steak, and a steak magically materializes, that feels more like next gen technology than classic Star Trek technology. But by the time we were in the classic Star Trek movie era, they had already transitioned to the no money economy. So clearly replicator technology was not necessary for the no money economy, but you may have hit it with the power source, whether we have replication technology or not. And I agree with you, replicators would probably use a whole bunch of energy, and it would be difficult, if not impossible, to have replicators be standard household equipment on our current energy sources. But in Star Trek, they also have, in addition to replicators and transporters and warp drives and all that stuff, all these things that would need massive amounts of energy to work, they also have what are currently fictional sources of energy. And we know that there is a fusion reactor in the Enterprise, and there's, I believe they mentioned there being a fusion reactor in on the space station in Deep Space Nine. So fusion technology, which we do not currently have, is a commonplace thing in Star Trek. And also, the ship, the warp drive, is powered by is fueled, I should say, by a matter antimatter reaction, which again is something that we can't do at the moment. And we may never be able to do, or if we can do it, it will be hundreds of years in the future. So so yeah, they do have futuristic energy sources in addition to the futuristic modes of transportation. In order to power them, they also have futuristic energy sources. And you are quite right that, and it would be a hell of a lot easier, a hell of a lot easier for us to transition into the utopian Federation society that we see in Star Trek if we could crack, you know, energy production so that you could have something like a fusion energy source that would provide clean and essentially endlessly renewable energy for large communities at relatively low cost. That would be a big step forward in creating the utopian Star Trek society, whether we got to replicators or not. Here's one from Tasby12. Hey, Steve, I don't know if this is a question so much as a rant, but I want to talk about how god freaking awful comedy has become in recent years. My ire was raised after seeing clips from an SNL parody, cleverly titled Period Lesbian Drama, with the announcer saying, starring two straight white stars, who, of course, then proceeded to stand there and comment on who they were. I couldn't help but think that a much better sketch would have a parody with a pretentious title, and two actresses who would have mocked the serious tone without telling the audience who they were. I am citing this one because it is the most recent one I saw. Are comedy writers afraid that if they don't explain their jokes, us flyover dum-dums won't get their brilliant genius? Imagine Airplane if Barbara Billingsley had said, "Excuse me, stewardess, I'm the one lady who conveniently knows the language they're speaking." Or if Robert Stack had said, "I'm the guy who removes glasses with a flourish." Boy, you have hit the nail on the head there. I have the same problem. Um, it's I don't even know if I can say most, but a lot of bad comedy writing I find is bad for exactly the thing that you are describing there, which is they cannot resist the temptation to underline and double underline their jokes. I think the best kind of joke, especially in a movie, especially in, you mentioned Airplane, um, the best kind of joke, especially in that setting, is one where you just you make the joke and you just let it sit there and you let people get to it on their own. If you draw attention to it, it's orders of magnitude less funny. And if you have characters react to it in the wrong way, like the thing about, like, again, to stay with Airplane, because I think Airplane is an example of a movie that almost always does this the right way. um, when something strange happens, when something odd or off the wall or goofy happens in Airplane, everybody no sells it. Nobody acts like it's anything unusual. That's one of the things that everybody complimented Leslie Nielsen on for his performance, because he was just deadpan about everything. All this really wacky, goofy, silly stuff was happening, and he never let on that he thought it was at all unusual. And that's part of what made it funny. If he had looked, if something had happened and he went, you know what I mean? Or if he did like a take to the camera, or if he reacted in any way as though he sensed that something weird was going on, it deflates the joke, because we in the audience are the ones who notice that it's weird, right? We don't need one of the characters in the movie to notice it for us, to cue us how to respond. We get it. If we know how real life is, we know how people usually act. And if something really, really weird and outside the lines occurs in the movie, we don't need a character in the movie to let us know that that's what's happening. That smothers the joke. So yeah, you are 100% correct, and it's been a problem on Saturday Night Live forever. It's one of the reasons why I don't watch Saturday Night Live anymore, because on the rare occasion when they do get a good idea for a sketch, or they have a really good joke in one of their sketches, they almost never are able to resist the temptation to point at it. They have to point at it to make sure we all know what they're. Oh, look! Did you get the joke? Did you get the joke? There was there was a sketch a few years ago. I remember because it's such a great example of what I'm talking about and what you're talking about. I forget what the sketch was even about, but one of the running gags in the sketch was Beck Bennett was one of the people in the sketch, and every time they would cut back to him, he would have on a different kind of mustache. And this happened, 2 or 3 times. Every time they would cut back to him, he would have a different mustache. And for the first few times they did it, nobody said anything. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody drew attention to it. And then the last time they did it, they couldn't help themselves. They cut back to one of the other people in the sketch who had noticed it, and he had to say, does your mustache keep changing? And it murders the joke. Like, we can see the mustache changing. We get it. You don't need to point at it. That ruins it. But they do that all the time. They do that all the time. And I agree with you completely. But I will also say, because earlier at the beginning of your question, you say how awful comedy has become in recent years. That's been a problem for a long time. Maybe it's more common nowadays, but it has been it's been an issue with Saturday Night Live from the very beginning, and that show's been on for almost 50 years. Maybe it's more common nowadays than it used to be, and so it feels like it's become more of a problem. But that kind of lazy, shitty comedy writing, where you write a joke and then you just have to have someone in the show point at the joke to make sure that everybody sees it, that's been a problem for a long time. But you're absolutely right. It's a horrible, horrible way to write comedy. Agent Meister, Peldor Joyce, Steve, you said recently that one of your favorite episodes of Enterprise was the one where Archer responds to letters from kids back home. One of those letters in the episode came from a town in Ireland called Kenmare, a real place I grew up only 30 miles from. I was tickled pink when Archer read the letter, and even more so when I saw that the town has an entry in Memory Alpha. If you ever feel the need to do on-the-ground research for an episode of Trek Actually, my parents converted our home into a B&B. So if you need a place to stay, let me know. You won't have to put your hand in your pocket for bread and board once you don't plan to stay for a month or anything. I hate to end with bad news, Steve, but Admiral Dougherty will not be joining us for dinner. Bummer. Agent Meister in Ireland. P.S. The beatings will stop and morale improves. Well, yeah, I don't think Admiral Dougherty is going to be joining anybody for anything. If the visit you're proposing would take place post Star Trek Insurrection. He ain't showing up for too much of anything, but that's really cool. I didn't remember any particular town being mentioned in that episode. It's full disclosure. It's been a long time since I've actually watched that episode, but it's one of the few Enterprise episodes that really sticks in my brain and made me think like, oh, I like that. I like that they're answering questions from people back on Earth like astronauts do on the space station or used to do on the space shuttle. It's really cool. But yeah, that's awesome that a town near where you grew up is part of Star Trek and has a Memory Alpha article. That's really awesome. And yeah, I do not foresee any trips to Ireland in my near future, but if that changes or if that ever becomes a thing, I will let you know, and I would love to check out your parents' B&B. That's really cool. Matthew Lordy says, hi, Steve. Do you take part in the zero waste movement? If so, what are some of the lifestyle changes you've adopted? Merci beaucoup. Unfortunately, I cannot say that I have. I am not a part of the zero waste movement. The best I can say is that I try to be as unwasteful, I guess I would say, as I can. We do have recycling here in this county, and I do recycle paper at the very least. I try to do what I can, but no, I'm not part of the zero waste movement. I actually looked it up when you sent me your question. The zero waste movement has as its goal that you will not send any trash to a landfill. So that means recycling, that means composting, all kinds of stuff. And I think all of that stuff is great. And I'm more power to anybody who does that. I think you're doing wonderful stuff, but I am not one of those. So sorry. But no, I appreciate you thinking so well of me. I appreciate you even leaving it open as a possibility that I might be a part of such a noble movement. Unfortunately, I am not. But thank you for the question and thank you for being a supporter. Relic 5000, greetings. So I really enjoyed your video on Starfleet's negligence toward its officers. And I think Lower Decks has another good example of a victim of such neglect. Lieutenant Commander Ron Docent, an engineer aboard the USS Vancouver, Lower Decks Cupid's errant arrow. He tries to transfer Rutherford and Tendi to the Vancouver against their will so he can transfer himself to the Cerritos. When he gets called out on it, he threatens the two ensigns with a phaser, then breaks down nearly to tears because he cannot handle the epic adventures the Vancouver goes on. Did no one on that ship notice that he's not doing so well? Does the Vancouver have the same quality of ship's counselor that the Enterprise does? The man desperately needs a vacation or a transfer to a subspace relay station. He can't hack it. He shouldn't be there, and no one has noticed. Thoughts? I forgive you if you have no clue what or who I'm talking about. No, I remember that episode, and I thought it was one of the better premises of the first season of Lower Decks. The idea that there is an officer serving aboard a ship that apparently is having like Enterprise like adventures where it's a very action packed, high stress job, and this guy just wants out. Like, he does not want this to be his life. He wants to go somewhere else where it's a lot less stressful. I think that's a really funny idea because it does reference a thing that is a real trope in Star Trek. And it's something that that I've noticed, that I made a video about, that a lot of other fans have picked up on and kind of joked about over the years. And I think Lower Decks is at its best when it can get a hold of something like that, and derive humor from that in a clever way. And yeah, so I definitely remember Lieutenant Commander Docent on the Vancouver and that story, and I appreciated it for the reasons that you describe. When I watched the episode, I thought, oh, that's a good idea. That's such a good idea for a Star Trek joke. The guy who is on the Enterprise like ship with all the amazing adventures, and he just wants to be done with it. And yeah, and the idea that nobody notices, nobody seems to have any concern for him. That yeah, I like that episode and I like that joke a lot. So thank you for bringing it up. And it is definitely a terrific example of what I was talking about in that Starfleet negligence video for sure. Dana Cole. There's been a lot of discussion on social media about the district that opted out of getting federal funds for free meals for all students. Someone on Twitter said it mostly affects students of color, as poverty disproportionately affects POC. I disagreed and pointed out the district is only 30% free reduced lunch. Even counting students who'd be eligible but don't get forms in, or those just past the cutoff, it still mostly affects students from families who can easily afford to provide meals. And that's the issue. This was already a problem, but it's only getting attention now that privileged parents are affected. People say conservatives have less empathy than liberals and leftists, but conservative folk here side with these families and are concerned about justice for them. That's the difference I see. Liberals and leftists push for the well-being of all, while conservatives push for their friends and family, their kind. What do you see as the difference between liberals, leftists, and conservatives? Well, I mean, you kind of said it in your question there already. I agree with you completely that it's not so much that conservatives don't have any empathy for anybody. I think sometimes we phrase it that way because that's how it feels, because they never seem to have any empathy for people outside of their in-group, but they definitely have empathy for people in their in-group. I think you're 100% right on that. And it's not that they are incapable of being kind or loving or merciful or giving people. It's just that they have a much narrower circle of people who they regard as deserving of that from them. And that's the problem. Even when you are proposing a scenario where they themselves wouldn't have to do anything, like the idea of expanding the number of refugees that the United States takes in, which we should, and it's a horrible offense and morally unjustifiable that we don't take in, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of refugees every year. I mean, we have the room, we have the capacity. There is certainly the need throughout the world. We should be taking in far more refugees from all over the world than we currently are. I support raising the refugee cap significantly. And if that were to happen, most conservatives, and in fact, most individuals, just generally speaking, would not have to do anything different. If the United States admitted many, many, many more refugees every year than we do now, chances are that your life and my life and the lives of all the individual Americans watching this video will not change at all. You won't have to do anything that you're not already doing. There will be people that will be needed to provide support and services, and some people will need to help these refugees get settled and get on their feet and find jobs and everything like that. But it'll be people that's their job to do that. And the most you might have to do is just accept that some people from other parts of the world now might live in your area. Like, that's the only real quote unquote sacrifice you'll have to make as far as that goes. But they still oppose it. They still can't, they'll fight tooth and nail to stop it, and will try their best to encourage other people to join them and to stop it as well, even though they themselves wouldn't have to do anything. It would be something that would help other people, and they wouldn't have to contribute to it personally at all, at least not directly. And still they oppose it because they don't think that those people are worthy of that compassion, of that benefit. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not that they lack, but if someone from their church or someone from their neighborhood or someone from their family was displaced, many of them probably would say, "Oh, you can come stay with us." So it's not that, which would require a change and a sacrifice on their part. And they'd be willing to do that, many of them, but they wouldn't be willing to even support the idea of welcoming people into this country from other parts of the world who have been displaced, even if they wouldn't have to do anything. So, yeah, I mean, I think that is a big difference between liberals and leftists and conservatives. And I think you're absolutely right. You're right, Dana. It's not lack of empathy in general. It's lack of empathy for people outside your in-group that is the problem. General Contact Unit Problem Child. So I enjoyed that video you made the other day, but I do want to make two arguments in favor of writers caring about canon, just to get your response. One, a lot of fans get enjoyment out of being able to construct a consistent image of fictional universes. I kind of feel like you're being a dick if you say that's unimportant because you don't get consuming fiction in that way. Two, I think if you don't try to be somewhat consistent in the canon of the fictional universe, it undermines your ability to tell good stories in it. For example, suppose you're writing a Trek-like show, and in one episode, a member of the crew gets fired. If you're totally inconsistent about how the economics of the fictional universe works, i.e., do they use money or not, we have no idea what's at stake for that character. Like, maybe getting fired is just embarrassing, or maybe it means they're going to starve on the street. In other words, I think having a consistent canon is necessary for establishing stakes. Well, look, I agree with you. I don't have a major problem with anything you're saying. And I think if anybody as a writer wants to make sure that they maintain a strict, consistent canon for whatever they're doing, or a continuity that doesn't contradict itself for what they're writing, I think that's great. And in fact, I would probably try my best to do that too, for the most part. The Star Trek video I made the other day, where I was, throwing out all the stuff about here's what I would do to break canon and stuff. Obviously, most of that is exaggerated and is stuff that, I wouldn't actually do, but it's just the idea of, let's throw this out to make people mad. If I were doing a Star Trek show If Alex Kurtzman called me up and said, "Hey, you can write a Star Trek show and it can be anything you want," um, I would try to make my show as internally consistent as I could too. And if I could write it in a way where I could tell the stories I wanted to tell and they would fit within the established continuity of the rest of the Star Trek franchise, I would do that. Except maybe for the odd little background gag here and there, just to, to throw a wrench in the works here and there. But it wouldn't be major story type stuff. It would be just, fleeting little things that would happen on screen or something that would happen in the background. Or stuff like slightly changing characters' backstories in ways that didn't really matter or affect the story, but just threw a little wrinkle in, so that it would be difficult or impossible to resolve. Just to tweak the fans who are that preoccupied with canon and consistency. But I wouldn't do it and I wouldn't intentionally break canon in ways that would threaten the story, because for me, story is king. Story is the most important thing. And so it's not so much when I make fun of people or I complain about people being too attached to canon or too preoccupied with the idea of internal consistency in fictional universes. It's not so much directed at creators. If a creator has decided they want their universe, their story world, to be as internally consistent as possible, and they are preoccupied with that, that is their prerogative as a storyteller, and I respect that. And to a large extent, I agree with it. I do think it's important for the integrity of the story. But as an audience member, if I am watching a show or a movie or reading a book or whatever that is an episode in a larger franchise, and it's a great story, and I am totally engrossed in it, and I am invested in the characters, and I care about what happens next, and there is something in that story that contradicts something in an earlier story, that's when I say, I don't give a shit about that. I remember the episode of Star Trek Enterprise where the Borg are in it, right? And the writers in that episode, they kind of bend over backwards to make it fit so that, the Borg are in the episode, but technically nobody knows that they're called the Borg, and the main characters don't see the Borg. And, so it can kind of fit within the continuity that they established in The Next Generation, where the first official meeting between the Federation and the Borg is still when the Enterprise finds the Borg, when Q throws them across the galaxy. But it also, these Borg that were left over from First Contact were encountered by the Enterprise crew, et cetera, et cetera. Like they try to fit it into the continuity. And honestly, the episode is good enough. Like, it's a really good episode of Enterprise. The Borg episode Regeneration is a really good episode of Enterprise, and a really good Borg episode. Probably the last really, really good Borg episode, in Star Trek. And I mean, better than all of the Borg episodes in Voyager. Like, I don't even think it's a competition. Better than any of the Borg episodes in Voyager. And it was so good that I don't give a shit about, oh, gee, I don't know, this doesn't fit because, the Captain Picard was the first captain to meet the Borg, and now here's Captain Archer facing the Borg, and what about contradictory? I don't give a shit. It's a good story. Now, if the writers were worried about it, it's the writer's job to worry about it. But me as the audience member, if the story I'm watching right now is engrossing me and pulling me in and making me care about what happens, that's the most important thing. And if it doesn't quite fit in with the larger continuity, so be it. So that's mostly what I'm talking about when I mention these issues. It's not so much from a writer's point of view, it's from an audience member's point of view. Scott P says, hey, Steve, new patron, but I've been watching your videos for a while now and have really been enjoying your various observations and insights into all things Trek and beyond. I found your canon-proof Star Trek show particularly hilarious, and it reminded me of the line from the MST3K theme song that tells the viewer it's just a show, you should really just relax. You've made it known that you are an MST3K fan, so I was wondering if you had any ideas or plans for a video on MST3K, or if that's something that interests you at all. I know for myself, MST3K has played a huge part in shaping my sense of humor and making it easy for me to make fun of and not take too seriously the movies and shows that I love the most. Also, Joel or Mike? Boy, you just had to stick the knife in between my ribs there at the end, didn't you? Yes, I am a huge fan of Mystery Science Theater. I would also say that it was very influential on shaping my sense of humor. I started watching it when I was probably 13 or 14, and it definitely was an influence on my sense of humor. I think a lot of my sense of humor is influenced by Mystery Science Theater. And I don't think I've never made a video about MST3K, but I have made many videos with it's me and characters from my Stuffy videos, where we basically do riff tracks or Mystery Science Theater treatments to public domain movies as shorts. And there's a playlist of them on my YouTube channel if you look for it. The tradition used to be I would do that every Thanksgiving, because they would do the Turkey Day marathon, and so to honor MST3K on Turkey Day, I would do my own sort of Turkey Day video where we would do MST3K style riffs on videos. And I haven't done them for a couple years because the Stuffy videos have been on hiatus for a while, but I would love to get back to those at some point. And yeah, I've done that. And those are some of my favorite videos I've ever made. It's so much fun to do. I can totally get why so many of the people involved in Mystery Science Theater are still doing that kind of thing today. Either they're literally still making Mystery Science Theater episodes like Joel, or they're doing riff tracks like Mike and Kevin and Bill, or they're doing I think Trace Ballou and Frank Conniff are doing the Mads, and they're doing movie riffs. So like so many of the crew from the original MST3K are still doing that kind of thing, and I totally get why, because it's so much fun. And so yeah, I mean, I've done that. I've never done a video just about MST3K, but I've definitely done MST3K type stuff in videos, and it's a ton of fun. And I will definitely be doing it again at some point. And yeah, I use that line all the time. I use that line all the time. It's just a show. You should just say to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. That is, to me, that is the best attitude to have with anytime some kind of continuity error or some contradiction or something that breaks canon pops up and kind of tickles your brain and makes you go like, oh, it doesn't fit. Like, instead of obsessing over it or trying to scramble and come up with some kind of convoluted headcanon to explain it away and make it fit, just say to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. Like, to me, that is the best way to handle it. And Joel or Mike, it's tough. And I love them both. And I also love Jonah. And I haven't seen much of Emily, and Emily was the host on the live traveling stage show that they were doing before COVID. So I didn't see any of those. So I haven't really seen Emily except in a couple of the live streams they've done, and that's kind of a different thing. But between Joel and Mike, I would have to say Mike. All due respect to Joel, I love Joel. Joel is the host in some of my favorite episodes: Cave Dwellers, Manos. What's another? Pod People. And my favorite MST3K episode ever, The Amazing Colossal Man, is also a Joel episode. But I think if I have to choose between them as a host, I'm more of a Mike guy than a Joel guy. But they're both brilliant. So it's tough. It's a tough choice, and you can't lose because they're both great. But if I have to pick, I would pick Mike. Jacob Monroe says, hello, Steve. Have you been really impressed by a particular scene from a movie you otherwise didn't care for? Boy, let me think. A good scene in a movie I otherwise didn't care for. I'll say the junkyard fight scene in Superman 3. It's not so much that I have a soft spot for that movie. It's not a good movie, but I have a soft spot for it. Like, I can watch it and have a good time while acknowledging that it's a bad movie. But that the junkyard scene in Superman 3, where Superman splits in half and it's Clark and evil Superman, and they have a fight to determine who's going to control Superman from that point forward. Like, that is a great scene. That is a fantastic scene. So that would be one. The lightsaber duel in Phantom Menace. I think that actually that may be an even better example, because I do not have a soft spot for Phantom Menace. I think Phantom Menace is a piece of shit as a movie. It's just absolute dog shit. There's nothing good about it except that lightsaber duel. That lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul is so good. And yeah. So that might be the best example I can think of right now, just as I sit here. Because the rest of that movie is just dreck. Is just, oh my god, what a disappointment. But the lightsaber duel is fantastic. Wolfie Basach, hey, hi Steve. I was thinking the other day how quotations can be used to add fabric to the point of view of whatever side of whatever fence a person happens to be on. Not only that, the real crowd pleasers can be pretty thought-provoking as well. What comes to my mind is Emile Camaret's classic, "When a man ceases to believe in God, he will not believe in nothing, he will believe in anything." When this one pops into my head, I often go into brain fuck mode for 10 minutes. And only my supervisor's clicking fingers 2 inches from my nose can defibrillate me. And so my question is, have you got a favorite quote? And if so, any particular reason for it? There's a line from I have a lot of quotes that I love, and it's difficult to pick one just on command. But there's a line from a Modest Mouse song that goes and oh, I can't let me try to think of the name of the song. It's the song Third Planet from their album The Moon in Antarctica. And the line that I love in the song goes, "The universe is shaped exactly like the earth. If you go straight long enough, you'll end up where you were." And I don't know why I love that line so much, but it has always stuck with me. And I guess the poetry of it and the the circularness of it, and just it's just a beautiful expression. The idea that not the earth is a globe, and yes, if you were able to just go in a straight line continuously, you would eventually wind up where you started. And the idea that the universe is the same way, and by implication that life itself is that way, and that it's somehow it's possible to you know to get back to where you were. But then I just remember there's also a quote that kind of has the opposite message that I also really love. Uh, that's from another song. It's from the Bob Dylan song Mississippi. That says, "You can always come back, but you can't come back all the way." And I love that too. And that's kind of the sad. That's like the sad kind of flip side of that Modest Mouse lyric, where it's like, "Oh no, yeah, the universe is shaped exactly like the Earth. If you go straight long enough, you'll end up where you were. But you can always come back, but you can't come back all the way. When you do get back to where you were, it won't be the same as when you left. You can go home again, but it won't be the same as the home that you remember, like that." So I don't know. It's those are the two that just popped into my head, and the second one came because it was suggested by the first. But I like. I don't know if I would say they're my favorite quotes, but those are the ones that popped into my head. And those are some that uh, you know. And I've just been reminded. I know Dana's favorite quote is from Maya Angelou: "Do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better." And that's a really good one too. That's probably more words to live by than the ones I thought of. Joe McClory says, "While I agree with the goals of reducing and in time eliminating gun violence, I fear that most of the plans that are proposed as potential solutions would do more harm than good to that goal for the people most at risk for gun violence. while you've said that if you could disappear all the gun, that you if you could, that is not a real solution. And most bans and buybacks to reduce the amounts of guns available mostly just take them out of the hands of the poor and marginalized, who are really the only people with a case for needing guns for protection. Banning the types of guns most used for shooting events will more likely just lead to people using other, perhaps deadlier types. And laws like red flag laws that have shown some chance of working have the problem of enforcement ignoring people born of privilege and labeling reasonable fears of police and white nationalists as paranoia and taking weapons away from people who are actually in need of protection. Is it worth the risk? Any other ideas? Um, there are lots of reasons not to do things. And I certainly see why. I understand the argument you're making, and I see why it's not a perfect solution, and that why if there are inequalities, as you would think there almost inevitably would be, toward when it comes to uh, pulling guns out of the population, that it would more likely be guns being given back or taken from poor people, because if you do a buyback program, who's more likely to sell their gun to the government in exchange for the buyback? A rich person with a gun who doesn't need the money, or a poor person with a gun who needs the money. I mean, it kind of makes sense. So I get that argument. I just don't know if I think that's important enough to say, well, then we just shouldn't do it. I am of the opinion that the gun problem in the United States is so out of control, and we have done so little about it for so long, that anything that it's difficult for me to think of something that would stand in the way of it, that I would say, oh yeah, we better just not do it. You know what I mean? Like, if uh, now, having said that, I also believe, and I've said this before, and I made a video about this in my "Where Do We Go From Here" series. I think police reform has to happen concurrently with gun reform. I think if we're going to if we're going to ban certain types of firearms and increase restrictions on firearm ownership, which I absolutely think we can and should and must do, and we're going to have buybacks to encourage people who have guns to give them up, which I think we should and must do. At the same time as we're doing that, I think we also need to be doing police reform and criminal justice reform to try as best we can to even out those inequalities, so that, red flag laws will not be abused, and police officers will not be in the same position to threaten the populace that they are now. And, um, you know, white nationalists who are heavily armed, that to me, that that's the kind of situation where an active confiscation would be justified. Like, just regular folks who happen to own guns out in the community. I don't think the best way to handle that is for, federal agents to batter down their doors and take their guns. But if you are, you know stockpiling guns in some kind of a compound, I think that is a perfect opportunity for federal agents to come in and take those guns away. Um, so it's yeah, it is not it's not a perfect solution. It's not an easy solution. It's not a simple solution, and it can't be done in a vacuum. I think we need to be doing multiple things at once to not only to like, I mean, police reform is necessary no matter what. So you need to solve that problem just on its for its own sake, but it would also increase the value of taking guns out of the hands of people as well. So I think we need to do all of these things at the same time. But no, yeah, I mean, I guess the short answer is yes, I do think it's worth the risk. I think we need to do all of these other things to reduce the risk and to mitigate the negative effects of it. But I think ultimately it has to be done. Like, it has to be done. Now, I don't think we should sit around and wait for the perfect solution that would be completely equitable to everybody, when there are 40,000 people a year being killed from gun related deaths in this country. And, that is not a problem that other comparable nations have to anything like the same degree. It just does, like, the problem in other nations that are like the United States, that have our same level of wealth, our same level of industrial development. We are the only country that has this kind of a gun violence problem. It's so far beyond the nearest, the second place country, that it's just it's obscene, and we need to do something about it. And the solution, there is no perfect solution, but I do think it's worth the risk. But I also think we need to do all those other things I said to try and make it as equitable and as effective as possible. Russell says, "Hey, Steve, hope you are well. My topic, no surprise again, is NYPD Blue. Now, I did have an opportunity to review your answer from last week, and I agree, Bobby Simone years are the best, especially seasons 3 and 5. But when I asked, did you think Kelly should have gone, I was referring to the character, not so much the actor. And here's why I think he should have left. He was complicit with Janice's involvement, not only covering it up, but also allowing Janice to rip pages from the ledger. Anyways, food for thought. The reason I love season 1 so much is because of Andy's story, the drunk who becomes sober, redeems himself as a cop, a father, and a lover. I love how they don't rush any of his story, and it feels totally legit. Finally, you mentioning Sergeant Martens from IAB being one of your favorites. I totally forgot his first appearance on the show was during the Kelly era in an attempt to take down Kelly, which at first glance makes his character unlikable. So in 2 weeks, I will ask about DS9. Well, thank you. And yeah, you're right. Sergeant Martens does appear in the first season. And I think that probably adds to Sipowicz not liking him very much, because Sipowicz associates him with trying to take down Kelly. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the way they wrote it, so that Kelly leaving was the right thing. I think that's part of the, the genius of the show, is that when it was time to write David Caruso's character out, they had him do something, and he did it for good reasons. Like, he did it to protect Janice, but he still did something that should have lost him his job as a cop. Like, that felt right. It felt appropriate. So yes, in that sense, I definitely agree with you that he had to go, that he should have left, and him leaving was the right thing dramatically for the show, and the right thing for that character in that story. And yeah, I mean, I love me some Sergeant Martens. Some random geek who asks everyone watching The Last Social Justice Alchemy to hear Tavi's story because I tried to fit it in 1,000 characters. So, Tavi has been disabled since 2014, got on SSDI in 2018, and Tavi will tell you that is a quick turnaround. She owes to her white male privilege. This was before she found out she was trans. But Social Security asked for a review in December. After the terrible, obtuse process, and a month later in July, they finally told Tavi their ruling that she is not disabled and took her off benefits, all because the hearing officer lied and said no witness statement was given, despite Tavi's wife giving a witness statement, and that Tavi has no work history since she hasn't worked in the last 15 years, despite Tavi working until 2014. And she had to fight Social Security's terribly obtuse system just to find that out. She missed August's payment. She is fighting to get it back. She is appealing, waiting a judge appointment, which could be months. And if they don't let her appeal anymore, they'll charge her for the SSDI payment she took. Pay $8,000 in 30 days. Again, how easy is it to get on disability? Well, I think a lot of the problem is, by the way, and yes, you say, and everybody go back and watch the last Social Justice Alchemy to hear the story and to find out more about that. I would encourage everybody to do that. And part of the problem is, with disability and with social programs that are there to benefit the poor and people in need, they're treated the same way that insurance companies treat paying out benefits. Like, when you apply for it, you are automatically placed under suspicion, and there are people whose job it is to try and prove that you don't need this or that you don't deserve this. And to me, that's completely upside down. The assumption should be that if you are applying for it, that you do need it, and that you do deserve it, and that you should get it, and you should get whatever help you need in order to get your head above water. Like, that should be the mentality. The service exists because there is a need for it. And we know from decades of evidence that fraud in these social programs is exceedingly rare. Most people who don't need disability or food stamps or whatever your public benefit might be, most people who don't need it don't apply for it. There isn't very much scamming going on there. There's an assumption that they're all scammers from right-wing politicians mostly who want to promote that image as an excuse for just getting rid of the program altogether or for casting suspicion on people who take advantage of it, but that mostly just doesn't happen. So this idea that, well, people need to show that they need to demonstrate their need. They need to prove that they really need it. Yeah, you're applying for disability, but you need to show that you really need it. Like, that's completely upside down. I don't think that's the way it should be approached at all. I think it should be approached with the assumption that if you are going to the trouble of applying for it, that you need it and that it should be given to you as quickly as possible. So, I mean, I'm terribly sorry to hear about Tavi's story. I know that is not the only story. There are thousands of people that have similar stories that either have not been able to get on disability or nutrition assistance or any some other state or federal program that exists to help people like them in their situation, and they haven't been able to get on it, or they haven't been able to get a big enough benefit or whatever. There are so many stories like that, and it's a travesty. So yeah, if you can go watch Tavi's story, and if there is, I'm sure there's a link in the on that video and in the charity links page that is linked on this video that Geek is good enough to maintain for us, that you can help Tavi out, and I would encourage everybody to do that. But yeah, it's way too difficult for people to get on disability. That's the answer. How easy is it to get on disability? It's way too difficult. And finally, last patron question from Isaiah Taylor. He says, so I saw this amazing thing on YouTube the other day. It's a Full House TNG intro. And there's the link. And I think I've seen that one before. I know you have stressed the importance of having a good story, but what does that mean? What is your version of a good story? To me, I think a good story is good too, but I'm having difficulty trying to ascertain what that means. Good character development, a moral standing, personality. I'm graduating from film school in a couple of weeks, and I've been experimenting with script writing. Can you give me some pointers? Thanks. And by the way, we mentioned this in the Hangout last weekend, but just once again, Isaiah, congratulations on finishing film school. I think that's awesome, and that's really, really cool. I never went to film school, so maybe you should give me some pointers. But I would say, for me, and I can only speak for myself, for me, a good story is a story where when I am reading it or watching it or however I'm consuming it, that I care about what happens next. And sometimes that's because I care about the characters. Sometimes that's because it has a plot that is really interesting, that has me thinking, oh, what's going to happen next? Sometimes it's because it's just beautiful to look at, or, whatever. There are any number of factors. With me, usually it's character, but it can be other things as well, or other things in addition to character. It can be multiple factors at work at once in the same story, but it all boils down. And I know that this isn't very specific and this is very subjective, but to me, it boils down to, if I care about what happens next, if I'm invested in the story, and that can be difficult to, you can't just achieve that on command. That's a result of good writing, and also not just good writing, but writing that is able to connect with an audience. And nothing that you write will connect like that with everybody in the audience, but hopefully if it means something to you, it will mean something to other people who are able to watch it or read it or what have you. But that's the main thing. That's what makes a good story to me. Do I care about what happens next? And if I don't, then I'm probably not having a good time. And I'm probably not going to think of it as a good story. But if I'm invested, if I want to keep watching because I want to see what happens next, because I care about that, because if there's a good guy and a bad guy, I want the good guy to win. If there's a particular character who is in jeopardy, I want that character to be okay. I want that character to reach their goal or to triumph over their adversity. to complete their journey. I care about what happens. That's a good story. And I know that's very general, but it kind of has to be, because there are so many different kinds of stories and so many different ways that can go. But if you want to boil it down to a single idea, that's it. Make me care about what happens next, and I will consider it a good story. So that's it for the patron and member questions. As always, thanks to everybody who is a patron or a channel member for being a patron and a member, for starters, and also for submitting such awesome questions. I really loved responding to them. And now I will turn my attention to those of you in the live chat, and I will spend the rest of the show hanging out with you all and answering your questions. So let's see what everybody has to say. Radical Bacon says, so Dune, I'm probably not going to watch it. Like, I'm probably not going to watch. I'm just not that into it. I mean, like I say, if it comes out and it gets like awesome reviews and people are like, no, God, you have to watch Dune. Like, I mean, I subscribe to HBO Max already, so it's going to be up there, so I can just watch it. So I'm not going to say I'm definitely never going to watch it, but it just doesn't appeal to me. Like, I'm just not that enticed by it. So at this point, probably not, but we'll see. Super chat from John Burns. Thank you very much, my friend. By the way, super chats are always appreciated and always encouraged. And I try to give first priority to questions that are asked through super chats. John Burns says, John Belushi SNL group therapy as Vito Corleone was a very good sketch. Oh, Vito, you're blocking. Elliot Gould as the psychiatrist. I don't remember that one specifically, but there have been good Saturday Night Live sketches. Like, I wouldn't say that there's never been a funny SNL sketch. There definitely have been SNL sketches that I have liked, that I have thought were funny, that were well written. They're just the exceptions to the rule. Actually, there was one a few years ago when one of the times when John Mulaney hosted, and it was a few years ago because I haven't watched the show for quite a few years, but it was when John Mulaney hosted, and it was a game show sketch. And those are usually just death. But Bill Hader was the host, and John Mulaney was a contestant. And the premise of the game show was that John Mulaney's character was constantly being asked to remember the names of women in his life, and he couldn't remember their names. And it was hilarious. It was hilarious. And like, everybody was against him. Even the host was ganging up on him and going like, like, how could you forget her name? You've worked with her for 4 years or whatever. And that was a really funny sketch and very pointed and a really clever idea. And yeah, it was, I really enjoyed that. But that again, that's like the exception rather than the rule. Wow, John Burns is just throwing them out here. Jesus Christ. Thank you, John. I'm going to go through John's really quick, and then I'm going to back up and answer some questions from some other folks. So John says, part 1 of 2, negligence toward officers video. James Blish wrote books based on a collection of episodes. During Omega Glory, Spock and Kirk hit one another. Spock raises this as being an offense in Starfleet. Kirk suggests they'd be in the brig after returning to the ship. Blish was able to mention things that were missed in episodes. You checked them out? No, of course, I'm familiar with those books. I know that they exist. I've never read any of the James Blish books, actually, but that sounds interesting. But no, I know they are still relatively highly regarded by people today. Even I think some of them don't quite match canon anymore, which, again, as we've established quite clearly, I hope by this point, I don't give a shit about that. But no, I've never actually read any of the Blish books. And then another one from John Burns, who says, do a Star Trek show. Can I bring in someone like Sam Rockwell, who then points out all of the things that are very convenient? Beaming through or not through shields, transporter doesn't work. I think Sam Rockwell would be great for that part. Actually, I think that's a great idea. Do you even watch the show? And last one from John, at least for now, says, hear about that loser Jeff Bezos. He's no longer a CEO or COO. What a bum. Guess he's going to be on a street corner with a sign that says, buddy, can you spare $1 billion? Something tells me Jeff Bezos is going to be okay. I think he saved his money. I think he pinched his penny. His money makes money at this point. So I think old Joff is going to be fine. And thank you, John, as always, for your generosity, and for all those super chats. Sarah Scott says, "What do you think of Prodigy?" I mean, it does. I haven't seen any of it yet, so I can't really say that I think anything about it. I mean, I'm going to watch it. Like when it comes out, I'm going to watch it. And I watched the opening when they released the opening title sequence earlier this week, and I thought that was cool. And I've had fun with a bunch of other people, like putting it under or putting it over different songs, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, I can't really say that I have any particular opinion about it because I haven't seen it yet. But I'm going to watch it when it comes out. George Trekkie says, "Is Q a trickster or a teacher, having our best interest at heart, or is it both?" It's both. It's both. Dana asks, "What gets you invested in a story? What makes you care about what happens next?" Well, like I said, I mean, it's usually characters. It's usually that I care about a character. It can be other things too. It can be an interesting plot. It can be a mystery that I want to know what the solution is. But usually it's character and something that almost always works with me, especially in like series drama, like a TV show or something. Although it happens in movies too, if it's that kind of a movie and it's well written enough. Um, if you can convince me that the characters in the story really care about each other, that gets me invested. If there's a friendship or a love affair or a mutual respect or like a professional partner, some kind of relationship between characters in in a story, and I can believe that it's real, and I can believe that these people actually care about each other. That kind of suspension of disbelief, where it's not just, oh, the man can fly, or oh, the ship can fly from planet to planet in a few minutes. If it's can I believe that these characters are real people and they really care about each other? That works on me almost every time. So that's one thing. 2-5 AD says, "How do you feel about fans who get enjoyment out of trying to get the canon straight in their heads?" You didn't really address that part of my question. No, if that's what people like, I have no problem with that. Um, it gets on my nerves a little when people use that as a reason to attack something or to dismiss something. If they say they don't like a particular story because it doesn't fit continuity, that feels just kind of joyless to me. If that's the only reason you can't get into it, because it doesn't match continuity, I don't know. But if other fans find enjoyment in that, if that's how they engage with the story or whatever, good for them. Like that, more power to them. As Jason often says, and as I say sometimes on a late seating, like what you like, and you could also add to that, like it however you like it. You know, um, it's just, I feel like sometimes fans use that as an excuse to rain on other people's parade, and that kind of gets on my nerves. But then again, as you pointed out in your question, sometimes when I do what I do, that feels like I'm raining on their parade. So, and I should probably be careful about that too. And it's fair to point that out. Um, Super chat from Jay Grant. Thank you very much. Who says, "This refers to the last Ask Away, but I still want to ask, would you live like the Lower Decks crew if it meant you got to have space adventures?" Oh, you mean like in bunks and stuff? That might be enough. Yeah. If I got to live on a spaceship, but I had to have like, bunk mates or sleep in kind of like a common dormitory, getting to live on a spaceship, getting to be like a Starfleet officer and live on a starship, that might be enough to get me to say, okay, I'll do that. Yeah. I'm that might be, what puts me over that threshold. Um, oh, Steve Schmeling says, "Thanks for having an Ask Away on a Friday. I have off for a change." Well, you're welcome. I wish I could say I planned it that way. Crystal Falman says, or Crystal Fajman says, "Have you ever read the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series? Disney's supposed to do a TV series. If so, who would you cast as the big three gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades?" I've never read the books, so I can't help you. But thank you for the question. And thank you for being here. Um, Duralta Trekkie asks, "What are your most favorite Star Trek novels and/or comic books?" I really liked the most recent IDW comic series set in the Kelvin timeline, and there were two of them actually. There was one just called Star Trek, and then there was another one that followed up with that one called Star Trek Boldly Go. I thought both of those were excellent. Um, I really love the Gold Key comics from the 60s and 70s. They're so much fun. They're just like, it's like Star Trek, but it's very much like 1950s kind of pulp sci-fi. It feels more like a pulp sci-fi magazine than it does a Star Trek story, because there hasn't been that much continuity built up. It's still, they're still making it up as they go along, and the artists have a lot more creative freedom to just go and do whatever they want instead of worrying about making it match a particular aesthetic. And I love the Gold Key comics. As for novels, it's been a long. I haven't read many of the novels, and it's been a long time since I've read any Star Trek novels. But my favorite is probably Federation by Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens. I really, really enjoyed that one a lot. 2 to 5 AD says, before the last few years, when was the last time American popular opinion and what the courts and government were doing was so far apart? The Hoover administration, maybe? Maybe. The cynic in me would say in the 60s, when they were in the 50s and 60s, when they handed down some landmark civil rights decisions, because I think at least among a lot of the white Americans, some of those civil rights Supreme Court decisions were not terribly popular. I don't know if that represented the overall popular opinion, but there was definitely a lot of Sturm and Drang kicked up by those. But yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. Derogatory Trekkie says New Orleans, Pennsylvania, and New York have been flooded as parts of North Rhine-Westphalia and Rhineland Palatinate roughly a month ago. Why don't the powers that be recognize climate change now? Well, a lot of the powers that be do recognize climate change, but it's just there are still some people that don't, or just refuse to deal with it, that are still have their heads in the sand about it. But there is, I mean, there is a lot of recognition among the powers that be, and but there's also disagreement on what to do about it. And the unfortunate truth may be that no matter what we do about it at this point, it may not make as big of a difference as we would want it to or need it to, because we've just waited so damn long to actually take meaningful action. Yeah, John, I think he pinched his $1 billion bills. um, James T. Kirk asks, what's my favorite Deep Space Nine episode? The Visitor, which is also my favorite episode of any Star Trek show ever. Let me see. Derota Trekkie said, oh no. Yeah, Derota Trekkie says, so someday I'm going to get Wonder Woman 1984 on Blu-ray, and I ask myself, is the Snyderverse done for good, or do we get more out of this? I mean, I think the Snyderverse, in the sense of the DC extended universe, I think they're probably still going to have some version of that at some point. It feels like the upcoming Flash movie is probably going to be their attempt to remake that a little. But so I think the franchise will continue, but will we still call it the Snyderverse? I don't. I think Zack Snyder himself is probably done at this point, but the franchise that he was a part of and that he helped to start, I think will continue. 255 AD said, what do you make of the argument that poor people need guns to defend themselves in some kind of social collapse scenario? I don't, I'm not usually moved by arguments like that. Like, I just, you know, it feels very apocalyptic. It feels very like catastrophizing, and maybe I'm being too optimistic, but those kind of arguments don't really move me. Well, we need the guns because what if society collapses? How is that any different from people saying, well, we need to have a bunker full of non-perishable food in our backyard because what if society collapses? Like we make fun of doomsday preppers on the right, but that's not a valid reason to question why people need guns on the left or on the more progressive side. Um, Sarah Scott says your anti-canon idea was just wonderful, but did you deliberately slip in some of the actual canon violations, or were they accidental? Oh no, that was very much intentional. That was very much intentional. That to point out that Star Trek has been very sort of slipshod with maintaining its continuity pretty much since the very beginning. And it's just a matter of the people who complain. People complain about some of it, but they accept others of it, and a lot of it is just whatever people are used to. Garrett, I have not talked about the Suicide Squad yet. I thought it was great. I thought it was one of the best of the DCEU movies so far. I would rank it right up there with Shazam and Birds of Prey as the best DCEU movies that I've seen so far. I thought it was terrific. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really, really funny. Dorota Trekkie asks, what is your progress on your and Dana Cole's fanfic? What would be the big Batman story you would still want to write? And what about a Batman 68 Star Trek crossover? Could it work? Well, yeah, that definitely could work. I think Adam West era Batman and Star Trek, that's a great crossover. Um, well, progress on our fanfic has been slow, and from both of us, because I know Dana would always would say like it would kind of say, oh, it's I'm a slow writer, give me a break, right? I have a big story planned that I want to write for it too. I have an idea for a Green Lantern Flash time travel story that I think is going to be great and a lot of fun. And I just have not had time to even start it. Dana, at least, is a good way into her next story. It's slow going, and she doesn't always have time to work on it as much as she would like to. But she's at least got a good bit done on it. My Green Lantern Flash time travel story is basically just an idea at this point. Like I don't even have the whole thing plotted yet. But when I ever do get around to finishing it and writing it, it's going to be terrific. As for the big Batman story, I don't really have a specific Batman story in mind right now. I would love to come up with an idea for a really cool like Batman and Robin story that I could write because I love Batman and Robin. Whether it's Dick or Jason or Tim, I don't know which Robin it would be. I would love to do stories about all three of them. Uh, but I mean, just in general, like if I'm putting together a wish list of like what's some fanfic I would like to write in the somewhat near future, I would love to do maybe after I finish my Flash Green Lantern story, I would love to write just a good old fashioned standalone sort of self-contained Batman and Robin story, but I have no idea what it would be. Um, John Burns asks, what was the Enterprise doing in the reboot of Star Trek II? Khan could beam across the galaxy, so why was the Enterprise necessary? Why was any ship needed? Because you needed to have a movie. Um, David Colby says, regarding your non-canon show, it actually makes a lot of sense for phasers to fire both beams and pulses. Both types are useful for energy weapons. Yeah, I know that's not really so much of a continuity break because you could just say, well, they have different modes. Sometimes they can do this and sometimes they can do that depending on what you need. But I just remember when the first Kelvin Timeline movie came out and the phasers shot in like little bursts instead of the beam that we were used to. There were some nitpickers who were like, that's not how phasers work. They don't fire that way. They fire beams. They don't fire pulses. So I kind of wanted to put a little kick to the ribs in there to those joyless fucks. Radical Bacon says, you watch the Snyder Cut. You can't be bothered to watch Dune. That is what I'm saying. I'm not saying I definitely won't watch Dune. I'm just saying at this point, I'm just not interested in it. And the only reason I watched the Snyder Cut was so that I could complain about it later and I could make a video about it, which I did. I didn't enjoy it. Um, Deralta Trekkie says, so did Superman kill Zod in Superman 2? I mean, Zod survived in one of the cuts, and I don't get why people are so happy for Soup's killing. Well, I don't get why people want Superman to kill either. I don't think it's good for the character. I don't think it's necessary for the character. I don't think it suits him to have him be killing people, especially just have him to be killing people willy-nilly. I don't think Superman kills Zod in Superman 2. I mean, you're right. There is a cut where we see Zod being brought out in handcuffs. So if you consider that to be officially part of the movie, then he definitely survives. And if we go with the theatrical cut where he just falls into the mist, that is ambiguous. So I don't think he dies. I don't think we're meant to think he dies. I think we're meant to think we don't know what happened to him. And I'm fine with that. Zeraxis says, have you ever played the game series Mass Effect? If not, I think you might like it. It's heavily character, moral dilemma driven. Sorry if that's been asked before. It may have been asked before. I'm not sure. But no, I've never played Mass Effect. I'm not really much of a video game player. Um, Sarah Scott says, thinking about Forbidden Planet, I've heard convincing arguments that it was the foundation of Star Trek. What say you? Someday I'm going to make a video about just that very thing because I agree completely. I think if you watch Forbidden Planet and you are familiar with Star Trek, especially Star Trek the original series, it feels a lot like a Star Trek movie. So I'm going to do a video at some point. And if it doesn't win the poll, I will just do it as an extra video some month because I do really want to make a video about that topic because I think it's a really cool idea, and I love Forbidden Planet. It's a terrific movie, and but yeah, I agree completely that Forbidden Planet is very much a template for Star Trek. Steve Schmeling says, about your host preference with MST3K, my favorite is Joel. My opinion with who is better is this. Mike is funnier, but Joel has the better episodes. You know, that I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Although Mike has some really good episodes too. And actually, Mike, just straight out of the box, Mike's first episode is The Brain That Wouldn't Die, which is a classic episode. And I think is Teenage Strangler his second episode? Teenage Strangler is also a fantastic episode. And plus, Mike gets Space Mutiny, which is one of my favorites. Mike gets Invasion of the Neptune Men, which I think is hilarious. So, I mean, there are a lot of really, really great Mike episodes as well. I mean, but I think, yeah, if you're looking at like absolute classic, series best episodes, Joel probably has more. But, and like I say, you can't go wrong. They're both terrific. And they're both really, really funny. James T. Kirk says, do you listen or watch to any other Star Trek channels on YouTube? I occasionally will watch Jessie Gender because she and I are friends, and I really love her videos. But I don't. Other than that, and maybe I can't think of Ryan's Edits, who does the re-edited TNG episodes, like the intakes where he'll put like outtakes back into the scene that are really funny. I watch those, but there aren't that many channels just in general that I make a point to watch, but yeah, other than Jesse, there's not a whole lot of Star Trek. But like I said, I don't watch a lot of of other. I don't make a point of watching a lot of other YouTube channels just in general, whether it's a Star Trek show or not. Super chat from John Burns that I missed says, I love the Galileo 7. As there was an African American lieutenant challenging Spock on behalf of his ensign's lives. Questioning Spock was pretty ballsy. And that's a great episode. Galileo 7, just generally speaking, is a great episode. And I agree. The challenging of Spock was very cool, because by that point, Spock had been established as like the smart one and the reasonable one. And to have the crew on the verge of mutiny against Spock, that's like a really, really dynamic, interesting situation. And by the way, as I'm scrolling back and forth through the live chat to find questions, if I do miss your question, I apologize. It's nothing personal. CMX says, I loved seeing the Patreon notification about the canon breaking video the morning after seeing your Twitter thread. Yeah, I was pleased with how quickly I turned that around. I thought that thread turned out really well. I was pleased with a lot of what I wrote there, and I thought, this should just be a video. So I shot it the next day and edited it, and it was up. I think I collated everything into a script and shot it and cut it and posted it like all in one day. I was very pleased with how it turned out. Radical Bacon says, I think I have ADHD. What do? I don't get, I think there's medication. I don't know. I'm not sure. Seek professional help. See if there's anything that you can do to make it better. I don't know. 255 AD says, do you think there's any chance of your state banning abortion now that it's okay? No, I don't think so. Maryland is pretty democratic. Maryland is pretty firmly a blue state, and our state legislature is democratically controlled, and probably probably will be for a while. It's a fairly stable Democratic majority in the state legislature. So I'm not worried about that in this state. No, but that is, that doesn't help people who live in other states. 2-5 AD also says, how would you feel about running disability benefits on the honor system? I think that'd be fine. Robert Mills, this is an interesting one. Would you be willing to let a medical device be implanted that automatically puts your thoughts on your writing program if it helps to increase your output? I don't think I would like that personally. I don't know if that would make me a better writer at all. I feel like, it's not so much translating my thoughts through the keyboard that is the problem when I'm having trouble writing. It's more just the will of doing it. And that affects my thoughts as well as my fingers, but maybe that will be helpful to some people. Radical Bacon asks, doing anything for Ask Away 100? I have no idea. I have no specific plans at the moment, but I'll try to think of something. And Serenity, thank you for posting the link to our late seating episode about Forbidden Planet. Absolutely. We did review Forbidden Planet for late seating. Who doesn't love Robbie the Robot? Come on. Steve Schmeling says, have you ever introduced anyone to any of your favorite shows? I'm proud that I got my stepmom hooked on MST3K. Well, I mean, I'm kind of introducing Dana to Deep Space Nine right now through Trek Reluctantly. I don't know if it's going to turn into one of her favorite shows, but I'm introducing it to her. And I think I also back once upon a time back in the day, I also introduced her to Mystery Science Theater, but she didn't like it. So, you win some, you lose some. But yeah, I've introduced people to MST3K in the past. I've introduced a few people to NYPD Blue, uh, which I take great pride in because I think that's a great show. I've introduced a few people to favorite shows. I'm not generally very evangelistic when it comes to things, especially in personal relationships. I'm not like, oh, you got to watch this. Like, I don't honestly give a shit. Um, but yeah, I've introduced friends and people I've been close to shows, to my favorite shows before. Sure. Um, Derogatory says, hang on, there it is. Derogatory says, what's the most idiotic episode title of Star Trek? For me, it's the German title of The Devil in the Dark. It's literally called Horta Saves Her Children. I think that's an awesome title. I think Horta Saves Her Children is an awesome episode title. So I will have to respectfully disagree with you there. I don't know. What do other people think? What are some really, really bad episode titles for Star Trek episode? I think pretty much anytime they go into Latin, anytime they do a Latin title for an episode, I kind of go like this. I'm like, okay, you know, it's a bit pretentious when you're dipping into the Latin for the episode title of your space show, of your pew pew space show. Let's have the episode title in Latin. It's a little pretentious. But I think Horta Saves Her Children is an amazing title. Um, Ard to Andal. What a great name, by the way. Ard to Andal. Asking what's on my t-shirt. I'm so glad somebody asked about my t-shirt. This is a new shirt that I just got this week, and it is a reproduction of a classic t-shirt of the one of my favorite pro wrestlers ever, Bryan Danielson. There you go. Better known thanks to his lengthy WWE run as Daniel Bryan. But of course, now he has left WWE, and presumably he will no longer be Daniel Bryan. He'll be going back to being Bryan Danielson, which is his real name and the name he wrestled under before he came to WWE. And rumor has it he is about to debut in All Elite Wrestling, and he may even be debuting this weekend at the All Out pay-per-view, which would be pretty cool because CM Punk just debuted in AEW a couple of weeks ago. And now, again, nothing official, but rumor has it, the little birds chirping on the internet say it may be happening this weekend, that Bryan Danielson will be debuting in AEW. So in anticipation of that event, I got myself a new version of the classic Bryan Danielson t-shirt. So that is what that is. That is a t-shirt of one of my favorite wrestlers. Thank you very much for asking. Oh, Jason asks, here's a question. Why do you like it when men hit each other so much? Because it makes me happy. Just makes me happy. You know why? Because we deserve it, us men. We're the worst. We have it coming. It's not just when they hit each other, Jason, and everybody. It's when there's a story. A good wrestling match needs a story, just like anything else. A good wrestling match needs a story. And what makes a wrestling match good is the same thing that makes any other story good that I was talking about earlier. Do I care what happens next? Do I care who wins? That's what makes a good wrestling match is, do I care who wins? So it's not just that they're hitting each other. Okay. I knew you were going there, Dana. Thank you very much for fulfilling that expectation. As soon as I said we've had it coming, I knew you were going there. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let me scroll back up here and see some other questions that I have no doubt missed. Yeah, Geek and Dana has introduced me to Hilda, and it's not my favorite, but I'm enjoying it a lot. Yeah, I'm enjoying it a great deal so far. Kemp Chalmers asked, do I have a favorite Chappelle Show skit? I really liked the Three Daves. I really liked the Wayne Brady stuff when he goes on like that sort of downward spiral odyssey with Wayne Brady where they're driving around and Wayne Brady keeps, attacking people or killing people. I love the Wayne Brady stuff. The Wayne Brady stuff absolutely killed me. I thought that was fantastic. I liked, I can't think of his name now, but the black white supremacist. I thought that was funny. I thought I won't say it because it's not appropriate, but the N-word family I think was a really funny sketch. There's a lot of Chappelle's sketches I read, but if I had to pick a favorite, it's either the Wayne Brady one or the Three Daves. Um, Viticus for bad Star Trek episode titles. The Naked Time. What a letdown that was. Boy, well, Sulu gave you half of it. You got to see half of a naked Sulu. Um, Gerard Trekkie says, I'm just watching Charlie's Angels. The first time I watched the original show. Did you watch it? And what is the episode you recommend me watch? I've never watched any Charlie's Angels. I've never watched the classic show. I didn't watch the Drew Barrymore, Lucy Liu, Cameron Diaz version in the 90s or the early 2000s, rather. I didn't watch either one of those, and I haven't seen the new one directed by Liz. I've never watched any Charlie's Angels, so I am completely useless to you as far as that goes. Robert Mills asks, will we have a Shives verse merch store, such gems as McPherson Loans and Protection Agency? Motto, we will fire off help immediately. That's funny. Jack will, by the way, when there are eventually new Stuffy episodes, Jack will not have a loans and protection agency, but Jack will have a business of some kind. I will tell you that. Super chat from John Burns. Thank you again, my friend. Says, sorry about this. You mentioned two wrestlers in a video, and one of them was CM Punk. Can you remember the other wrestler if you were to compare them to 80s, 90s wrestlers? Who might they compare to? Well, CM Punk was one, and then was Bryan Danielson the other one? CM Punk, I'm not sure. Bryan Danielson you can compare to like great technical wrestlers, like maybe Dean Malenko or going further back, maybe Ray Stevens. As far as Punk, maybe a little bit of Randy Savage in terms of in-ring style. Maybe a little bit of I don't know. It's tough to compare. I mean, but in terms of like being able to talk and like microphone skills, maybe someone like Roddy Piper. But it's tough to draw like a one-to-one comparison. Super chat from Kirak 2011 says, hey, Steve or Room, curious question. I vaguely remember a comic with DS9 meeting up on Talos 4, but ever since I saw this 20 odd years ago, to be continued, second part forthcoming. While we're waiting, CMX says, a ridiculous, and Sarah Scott mentioned Spock's Brain as a bad Trek title, and CMX says a ridiculous title for a ridiculous episode, somehow apt. Spock's Brain. Yeah, I don't know what else you would call that episode. Like, I don't think Spock's Brain is a bad title at all. Like, what else are you going to call it? That's the episode. Like, the whole thing centers around Spock's brain. So there you go. Jester of the Trekkie Bonesaw. And here's the second part of Kirak's question. I can't find it. Don't remember what book I found it in, nor can I find any reference to it. Does anyone know of this? So I don't know which one you're talking about, but does anybody else remember a DS9 comic where they go to Talos 4, which is the planet with the Telosians that have the power to project fantasies into your minds, the aliens from The Cage. I don't remember that, but if anybody else does, pipe up, speak up in the chat. Help somebody out, would you? For once in your life. I'm sorry, that came out wrong. Oh, John Burns. Yeah, Joe Piscopo dated discovers comedy. The outrageous Okona. That's not a great title. Yeah. because Okona doesn't actually turn out to be that interesting of a character or that outrageous. So, you know, um, oh, Steve, oh, the Prince stuff. Oh my God. Yes. I totally forgot about that. Charlie Murphy's Prince story is amazing. Yes. And actually the other Charlie Murphy one too, the one about Rick James, those are both fantastic. Yeah, boy, I should have remembered those. Those are fantastic. Um 255 AD, I like this. I like Forbidden Planet. I was real annoyed when I got to high school and they made us read a boring version of it set on an island. That one didn't even have a robot. I know, right? And didn't even have an id monster. Come on. Um Director Trekkie says, so imagine you'd write a character who comes from your hometown. How often would you reference it and what would your character say about the town? I don't know how often they would reference it, but they wouldn't have very much complimentary to say. you know? Um, because I don't know if you've ever gotten this impression from my work over the years, but I don't think Hagerstown is a very nice place. Dana asks, who are your favorite female wrestlers? Um, well, right now, because I'm mostly watching AEW, I don't watch WWE anymore. A few years ago, I would have said like Bailey and Sasha Banks and Charlotte, Becky Lynch, but I can't really say them anymore because I don't watch them because they're in WWE for now. Um, I like as far as AEW women's wrestlers, I really like Hikaru Shida. I like Britt Baker. I like Nyla Rose. I like let me see who's another one that I really like. Oh, Chris Statlander is good. Actually, Chris Statlander is getting the title shot. It's she versus Britt Baker is the big women's match on the pay per view this weekend. I'm looking forward to that one. But yeah, those are some of my favorites at the moment. Um, R2 Andel says, I love wrestling, not for the sport, but for the ability to objectify half naked men. Sometimes you get a bonus story. Yeah, and often significantly more than half naked as well, if that's what you're there for. I mean, there's plenty of near nudity in wrestling for sure. Um, Sarah says, Picard's Implants is a great title for Best of Both Worlds, for sure. Uh, Gerald the Trekkie says, I still haven't watched Lower Decks. I think the animation style is ugly. A Disney style a la Aladdin would have been better, and I don't like gross out humor, but should I give it a chance? I mean, I would say so. I don't mind the animation style or the art style. I think I'm fine with that. There's not a lot of gross out humor. There is some, but the show doesn't lean on that too heavily. I think Lower Decks is a fine show. I don't like it nearly as much as a lot of my fellow Trek fans who like go gaga over it every new like there have been a couple of Lower Decks episodes that several of my fellow Star Trek YouTubers or podcasters or whatever who I know and follow on Twitter, like they'll go on after the episode and they'll say it's one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever. I have not liked any episode of Lower Decks anywhere near that much. There's no episode of Lower Decks that I would count as among the best Star Trek episodes. I don't like it nearly that much, but I do like it and I do enjoy it. It doesn't really make me laugh all that much, but it usually makes me smile. And I enjoy it and I am happy for having watched it and I'm happy to have it there as a part of the franchise. So I would recommend you check it out. But I'm not going to tell you that it's like the best thing ever because I don't think it is, but I do like it a lot, and I'm glad to have new episodes of it. And there was one gag in not this week's episode and not last week's episode, but the week before last week's. So 3 episodes ago, I guess now, or 2 episodes ago. I don't know. Anyway, um, There was one sight gag that did make me laugh a lot and is one of the funniest and darkest jokes I have ever seen in a Star Trek episode. And those of you who watched that episode will know what I'm talking about when I say it was the skeleton hanging from the ceiling. It absolutely killed me. It was so funny and such an amazing black gag. Is just absolutely dark, and I loved it. So yeah, but yeah, I think Lower Decks is a good show, and if you haven't checked it out, I think it would be worth checking it out. Another super chat from John Burns who says, I hate that you state your opinions in your videos, especially this one. You want me to lie about my opinions? LOL. Watching a stream, a guy mentioned coming to his parents recently. Lots of love. Coming out to his parents, I guess, is what you meant to say. There are lots of love. Okay, well, I'm glad if you're watching a stream where somebody came out to his parents recently. Yeah, lots of love to him from me too. I think that's great. And yeah, people who, yeah, I mean, like I don't make any secret that my videos are full of my opinions, and I've never been bashful about sharing my opinions in my videos. So for people to be like, why do you have to put your politics into it? Like, watch somebody else. Oh, Sarah Siamak was the one who came up with Picard's implants. Yeah. Well, good on you, Siamak. That's a great title. Vidicus, would you rate it 5, 6, 7, or 8? And that's another moment that I really loved. And you could probably guess, like as a Riker fan, I love seeing animated Riker. And yes, that made me laugh too at the end of that episode when he says, "Give me warp in the factor of 5, 6, 7, 8." I thought that was great. 285AD says, with regard to the zero waste thing, isn't it better to campaign for systemic change rather than making a massive effort in your private life for ultimately tiny effect? Yeah, I would go along with that. That's part of the reason why I don't feel too bad for not being a zero waster. I mean, I do admire people who do that and have that level of commitment. But you're right. I think the ultimate answer to environmental issues are not going to be found with individuals changing our behavior. Although I think that helps. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it has to be broader. It has to be systemic change. It has to be large corporations changing the way they operate, which will probably require government to force them to change the way they operate, because I think history has shown that they don't make those kinds of changes on their own. So yeah, that's what's really necessary. But, I think it's fine to try and make a difference bit by bit on your own as well. And also, to set examples in that way. Yes, of course, Geek, you're allowed to share your opinions. And Dana, you're right. I don't have to include my politics. I choose to, because my politics are important to me, and because the people who watch my videos who will be annoyed by them or insulted by them or upset by them are people that I want to annoy and insult and upset, because fuck them. Like there was a comment on my video, on my Superman video, because I put in a joke. No, it's not a joke. It's how I actually feel, but it was kind of phrased as like a joke. About conservatives, where I talked about how, like, Kyle in Superman and Lois, Lana's husband, I talked about how his political beliefs are rooted in ignorance and self-delusion and fear. In other words, he's a conservative. And there was a couple of comments on the video from people who were like, oh, that's a little harsh. That's a little stiff. Come on, conservative. And, there was one guy who left a very nice comment who said, look, I'm a conservative and I enjoy your videos. And I thought that was a little out of line or whatever. And it's like, I mean, I appreciate you airing your grievance in a civil way, but to hell with you. Like, I mean, honestly, how long are we all supposed to sit around and just nod respectfully in your direction while you help to fuck everything up? If you are a conservative and you vote for conservative politicians and you advocate conservative policies, and you think that a conservative worldview is the best way that we should govern each other and organize our society, I'm sorry, you're fucking everything up for everybody. And you have, yes, you have a right to your opinion and you have a right to your beliefs, but that doesn't mean I have to fucking respect your bullshit beliefs that are getting people killed and are fucking up the world. Just because you're nice about it on YouTube, just because you say, "Oh, it's just a shame. I like your videos. It's just a shame because I'm a conservative and I like your videos." Well, fuck you. If you want us to get along, don't be a fucking conservative. Because you're fucking everything up for everybody else. And you have the right to believe that, and you have the right to believe whatever you want, but you don't have the right to expect me to be respectful to you for it. Fuck you. Like, how many decades has this been going on? Because you're civil about it, you think that the rest of us should just kind of let it go? Because you're fucking up the whole world? No, fuck you. The least of your problems should be somebody being a smartass to you in a YouTube video. That should be the least of your fucking problems. Suck it up. Get over it. Super chat from John Burns, who says, always loved the Deadpool 2 gag with Beast closing the door behind Deadpool with a bunch of mutants. We're inclusive of Deadpool, just not right now. That is such a great joke. That is such a great joke. When they're in the X mansion and Deadpool's like, where are the X-Men? And then they cut to that shot of them all in one room and the door sort of closing, hoping that Deadpool doesn't notice them. God, I love that. It's one of my favorite jokes from a superhero movie in quite a few years. I loved it. I loved it. Stephen Fenn with a super chat says, here's 565 Canadian. Keep up the good work. Thanks for answering my question. Well, thank you very much for being generous. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for the super chats tonight. I appreciate your generosity from all of you. Oh, yeah, Dana, this is a good one. It says, did you see the comment from the guy who said he was a conservative who agreed with liberals 80% of the time? How does that make you a conservative? Exactly. Then you're not a conservative. Stop calling yourself a conservative. It's a shitty identity to claim anyway. It's like saying, well, I'm a really nice guy and I give to charity and I try to help everybody and I'm kind to people, but I still self-identify as an asshole. But why do you want to? Why would you want to call yourself a conservative if you're actually not? Conservatives are fucking assholes and they're ruining everything. Why would you want to be thought of as one of those? Fuck them. And see, I'm like, yeah, exactly. They are rarely civil. Yeah. And it's cool because a lot of their beliefs are inherently uncivil. Like just because you're able to express it in a calm way and not be overtly insulting to people. Like if you think that people shouldn't have the right to get abortions, what's the civil way to say you should be forced to stay pregnant? What's the civil way of saying, I believe that the government should have the power to force you to stay pregnant if you get pregnant and you don't want to be pregnant anymore? What's the civil way of putting that across, of arguing in favor of that, right? What's the civil way of saying that if you are discriminated against because of your skin color or your country of origin or your religion or your gender identity or your sex or whatever, what's the civil way of saying, well, you should just shut up about it because I don't believe that those problems are really important, right? What's the civil way of saying that? Yeah, yeah. I say again, fuck them. Dorothy Trekkie says, did you know that originally the blue gill aliens, the one from Conspiracy, were supposed to be the Borg? Do you think that might have worked? I mean, who knows how well it would have worked? I mean, it's hard to imagine hypothetical stories that never happened, but I mean, I think the Borg work because they're the Borg. I think, the idea of them being a combination of human and technology, the idea of them losing their individuality to a collective, the idea of them being sort of forced to join that collective through assimilation, like all of that. The idea of like a single consciousness and like this unstoppable thing. Like, I think those are all the things that make the Borg interesting. So I don't know if they would have been the Blue Gill people, if that would have worked or not. John Burns with another super chat says, if Roe versus Wade is now irrelevant, is it ever relevant? Or was it ever? Well, it's still relevant. I mean, it hasn't officially been struck down. It has just sort of been, it's been struck down in Texas for all intents and purposes because the Supreme Court has decided to allow that law to stand, but it has not officially been struck down. Um, but yes, it's important, and it will remain important until Congress actually passes a law to codify it, which is what they should have done a long time ago. And now they really better do that, to make it clear in law, not just because of judicial precedent like Roe v. Wade, but to make it clear in legislation, in the United States Code, people have a right to have an abortion. That right exists, and we recognize it, and it will be enforced by law. That's what needs to happen next. But whether or not that actually will happen, I do not know. 255AD, this is a good point. Are the Trumpist hate as the point conservatives actually the honest ones, not that polite asshole? I think they are more honest about the natural endpoint of their beliefs, yes. I think the fact that they do not try to hide behind civility and they don't try to convince people, that they are anything other than what they are. I mean, I do think that is more honest than, I'm a conservative, but I'm a civil, polite conservative, and I like to be friends with liberals and progressives because I just, I don't think people should be, separated because of differences of opinion and all that fucking horse shit. Like that is deeply, deeply dishonest. And so, yeah, the people who are just open about like, fuck it, I'm an asshole. I hate people who are different than me and I want them to suffer. I mean, they're still monsters. And fuck them too, but they are at least a little bit more open about it. Yes. Yeah, Steve Schmeling, exactly. Conservatives don't want the government telling you what you can or can't do unless you're pregnant or non-Christian or a person with pre-existing condition. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not a terribly consistent position. Yeah, and CMAC, I agree with you there too. Judicial reform needs to happen too. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Um, Derota Trekkie says, I just found out that the Whedon cut and the Snyder cut have salvageable parts. Should there be a third cut combining the salvageable parts, or should JL be written off? No, the Whedon cut was the salvageable part. The Whedon cut is probably the best you're going to get from that movie. I can't think of anything that was included in the Snyder cut that was not also in the Whedon cut that would have improved the movie. All the stuff that was taken out of the Snyder cut for the theatrical cut was stuff that should have been taken out. So, I mean, unless there's like just a whole bunch of shit that wasn't in either version that could somehow magically make a good movie, which I tend to doubt that. No, there should not be a third cut. There shouldn't have been a second cut. Like there shouldn't have been a Snyder cut. The theatrical cut was as good as it's going to get, and it was still awful, but it wasn't as awful as the Snyder cut. And Draghi also says, while we're at superheroes, there was a short comic of a henchman who was stupid as fuck. Turned out later he was sometimes Batman, Robin, or Batgirl in disguise. Ever heard of it? It sounds familiar, but I can't place it specifically. But it does sound familiar. But I'm not. I can't say exactly like what that story is. Another super chat from John Burns. Thank you, my friend. Says, in Canada, Parliament sent abortion legislation to the Supreme Court, who sent it back saying, this is yours to legislate, not us. Listening, Congress? Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great point. I wish I think our Congress should do the same thing. Our Congress should say, this is our job. This is our responsibility. We're going to pass this law, make it clear that this is a right that people need. Geek, I have not finished Young Justice. I am hung up somewhere in the second season, I just got away from it and haven't gotten back into it. I have enjoyed it so far. It's not, I didn't stop watching it because I didn't like it. I just kind of got distracted by other stuff. But yeah, especially in season 2, it really picks up and becomes pretty good. Season 1 was just kind of okay, just kind of like, oh, all right. Season 2, there is a noticeable improvement. So I do want to get back and finish it at some point, but I haven't yet. But I have enjoyed what I've watched so far. And Geralt Trekkie, I agree with you 100%. As much as I loved the Suicide Squad and I loved seeing Starro in the Suicide Squad, if I was going to nitpick, I would say the only thing wrong with this is that Starro should not have been the villain of the Suicide Squad. Starro should have been the villain of the Justice League movie. And the fact that they didn't do Starro as the villain of the first Justice League movie and they went straight to Darkseid, who is, and I'm sorry, I know there is difference of opinion on this, and I know I'm not, this is just my opinion. Darkseid is a boring fucking villain, and I don't care if I ever see him again in anything. He's a generic bad guy. He's just, he's big and so powerful, and he wants to control the universe, and he wants to, God, oh my God, fucking yawn. How is that better than a giant fucking starfish? Like, Starro is so cool. Is such a great, goofy Silver Age villain. Darkseid is like, you couldn't pick Darkseid out of a fucking lineup. Darkseid is big, scary guy with dreams of galactic domination. Fucking yawn. Who gives a shit? That's just me. I don't know. But yeah, they go straight to Darkseid because he's the one all the fucking edgelords want to see for some reason. And that's who Snyder is pitching his content at. I wouldn't do Darkseid at all, full disclosure. Like, it's not like, I would save Darkseid for the second or the third. I wouldn't do Darkseid at all because I don't give a fuck about Darkseid. But I would definitely do Starro first. And the fact that they didn't do Starro first and that James Gunn picked him up and said, let's do Starro for the Suicide Squad, and it was awesome, to me, tells you a lot about what has been wrong with the DCEU up to this point. Is that it was originated by people who prefer Darkseid to Starro. Oh, Gerard Trekkie, about the indie flicks. It says in Germany today, the TV station Cable One started the Indiana Jones marathon since the movies turned 40 this year. What's your most favorite indie flick? Mine's the third. Me and Dana did a video about that a couple weeks ago where we talked about Indiana Jones movies. And I think my favorite is still the first one. My favorite is still Raiders. I like Raiders of the Lost Ark a lot. Dana makes a really good argument for Last Crusade. And I think Last Crusade is an awesome movie, and it's definitely right up there with Raiders, and is certainly my second place. But I would say Raiders is my favorite, followed by Last Crusade. John Burns, James Gunn, we like him, we hate him. Which? I like him. I think as a director and as a writer, he's terrific. I like James Gunn quite a lot. 255 AD says, was it a mistake for the progressive movements in the UK and the US to just assume they could fix everything by getting one social democrat elected to the top job? Well, clearly, clearly that was a mistake. Yes, I agree. That was a terrible mistake. I mean, the nice thing about our system, one of the nice things about our system, is that the president only has so much power. Like, you don't want, or in your case, in the parliamentary system, the prime minister, right? the president only has so much power, right, in our system, which is a good thing because you don't want to have a dictator at the top. You don't want the chief executive to have too much power because then that could easily flip over into authoritarianism. But the downside of that is if you elect a Democrat to that top position, I mean, that's great. That's better than having a Republican there, but it doesn't fix all your problems because the president only has so much power. The president can only do so much. So you need to have, a progressive president, but also progressive majorities in the legislature as well. And preferably also, judges appointed by progressive leaders, so that you'll have a court that's not innately against you. um you know so yeah, it's not just it's always a mistake to say, well, let's just elect one of our people into the top job and that'll be and then we can all relax. Like, oh no, 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 that's not the way this works. That's not the way this works. um Dana says I'm wrong about Crusade and I should be ashamed. But Dana, I think Last Crusade is a great movie. Am I wrong about that? I should be ashamed for thinking Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is an absolutely excellent, wonderful movie. Are you saying I'm wrong about that? And I should be ashamed? What? Jason says it's time to say goodnight. Jason says I should say goodnight and let these nice people have their lives back. All right, fine. And, wrestling starts in less than 2 hours anyway, so I should go so I have time to do other things before wrestling starts. I'm going to end the show. Jason says to end the show. Dana's yelling at me because I like the wrong Indiana Jones movie. I guess, and we have been going for over 2 hours, so it's time to end the show. So, thanks to everybody. And I'm getting to the charity links, Geek. Thank you very much for reminding me. Thanks to everybody for watching, for joining me. Thank you so much for all the super chats. I really appreciate it whenever you are generous enough to bestow me with super chats. Thanks for all the questions. Do not forget, as some random geek just reminded me in the chat, to visit the charity links, charitylinks.page, which is a Google Doc that Geek has put together for us that has PayPal links and crowdfunding sites and legal defense funds and all kinds of other things for folks who need a helping hand. It is charitylinks.page. It is linked in the description. John, thank you once again for one more super chat. Lots of love to you as well, my friend. Yeah, thank you. Check out the charity links if you're feeling generous. Please help out some of our friends there. We would really appreciate it. Also, if you want to support my work, you can do so either by becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives. You can become a patron for any dollar amount a month that you can afford and you think I'm worth. $1 a month, $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, however much you can afford or however much you think I'm worth. I appreciate it. All of it, whether it's $1 or more than $1, if you can afford it and you think I'm worth it and you enjoy the work I do on YouTube, I would ask you to support the channel in this way because it really helps me out and helps me to continue to do this and also, to pay my bills and stuff. And also, if you would rather become a channel member, you can do that as well just by clicking the join button down there. Click the join button and you can become a channel member at one of various donation tiers that I have set up. And it really doesn't make a difference. Some people say, like, is it better to be a patron or a member? To me, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Either one is a great help to me. And they both have similar benefits. If you become a patron at $5 a month or more, or you become a channel member at the $5 a month level or higher, you get access. You get a shout out at the end of the of a Trek Actually video. And if you become a member or a patron at any level, you get access to the patron and members only feeds where you can submit questions ahead of time for ask away streams like this one. And I answer pre-submitted questions from patrons and members first. And you also get the chance to vote in polls that choose upcoming Trek Actually topics. And you also get the chance to join me once a month for the live hangouts that I do with patrons and members that are always a lot of fun. So patreon.com/Steve Shives, or just click the join button to become a channel member. Helps me out a lot. Also, don't forget that in addition to the YouTube thing, I am a co-host of some awesome podcasts that are a part of the Let Me Listen family of podcasts. I am on the Ensign's Log, which is the movie review podcast that I fucked that up, didn't I? I'm on Late Seating, which is the movie review podcast that I co-host with Jason, who is in the chat there as Opinionville, who is rushing me off, telling me to end the show. Anyway, Late Seating is the movie review podcast where we review classic films and see if they deserve whatever reputation they have, be it good or bad. Our most recent episode of Late Seating is our review of Braveheart that you can listen to right now. And next week will be our review of Terminator 2. So that'll be fun. We're recording that this weekend, actually. And also, I'm on the Ensign's Log, which is the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I co-star on alongside Jason and alongside Dana, who is also in the chat with us tonight as usual. And the three of us play low-ranking officers serving aboard a certain Federation starship as it continues on its continuing mission. I think you see where I'm going with that. It's Star Trek The Next Generation. Our characters live on the Enterprise during Star Trek The Next Generation. And the new episode of that just went up today, and it's a great episode. It was really fun to record, and it turned out really funny. If you have not heard the Ensign's Log, I would encourage you to check it out, especially if you like the Star Trek stuff that I do on this channel. I think you'll really, really enjoy the Ensign's Log. It's a terrific show, and we have a lot of fun making it. So you can listen to the Ensign's Log, you can listen to Late Seating, and the rest of the awesome Let Me Listen podcast by going to letmelistenpodcast.com, and the links to Late Seating and Ensign's Log are also down in the description of the video as well. So there you go. Thank you all so very much for watching. Thank you all for the questions. Thank you all for supporting the channel in whatever way you do. And have a good weekend and take care. I will see you next time. See you later, everybody.